Next up, we have one of, in my opinion, the more intriguing and polarizing draft prospects of this entire process in Jalen Mayfield, the offensive tackle out of Michigan. It seemed like coming into the year off the back of 2019, there wasn't a ton of buzz surrounding Mayfield, which contrasts that to say Alex Leatherwood, for example, who I did just do in a previous video. Make sure you click the link above my head if you haven't seen that. But Leatherwood came into the year. People were saying he's almost a lock for the top 15. Month after month, game after game, you see him sort of slipping down boards, and now it's a rarity to find him in anybody's first round discussion, right? So Mayfield, he's been sort of the opposite. He's been the late riser who, off the back of his 2020 play now, was shooting up boards until seemingly just a couple weeks back at his pro day, right? And getting into the measurables and measurements, a lot of people are seeing red flags now with the performance that he had out there the other day. He was 6'5", 320, 326, I believe it actually was as pro day. So consistent with the numbers Michigan had him listed at. But in terms of the testing, the 5'3", 140-yard dash, the 5'9" shuttle, as well as just that 8-foot broad jump, really had people scratching their heads, and myself included, to an extent. Obviously, you guys know if you've watched any of my videos before that I'm not a huge proponent, or I don't put a ton of stock into what you can do in a t-shirt and shorts compared to what you do in a helmet and shoulder pads. And I think that even those numbers alarm me a little bit because I felt like on the field he looked like one of, if not the most mobile offensive lineman when it came to particularly navigating in space. Michigan, they asked him to do a bunch of pulling around the edge, climbing up to the second level, and hey, when it came to hunting down a corner and flipping his hips to get upfield and chase them down, I felt like he looked really solid when it came to, like I said, climbing to the second level, looking for a linebacker, maybe going even further to find a safety. I felt like he looked very quick, very explosive, very fluid in his hips and all that stuff. So I'm a little bit alarmed by the pro day numbers, but I'll be honest, I did not go back and change the athleticism grade off of it, right? I'm going to stick to what I saw in the helmet and shoulder pads, which people are going to disagree with right off the bat. Obviously, 4 out of 5. Some people are saying now, he can't be a tackle. He's got to be a guard. I should mention he also had 32 and 5/8 inch arms, which I believe is the shortest of anybody really in this class in terms of tackles, at least. I haven't seen anybody shorter yet. So people are really, they're probably really disputing the 3 out of 5 on size and length. They're probably really disputing the 4 out of 5 on athleticism. For me, that was more so a film grade. And I'm going to stick with the film because there is a possibility, maybe not a very high one. It's tough to tell. That could have just been a bad day, right? That's the problem with having no combine. We don't really have that sort of mediator where we can set a baseline and then see what happens at the pro day, right? He could be a 5'1" guy on his 40, got a bad night of sleep beforehand, and now he's a 5'3" guy, right? That's sort of the problem with only having one day of testing. So with that being said, obviously getting into more of the sort of film analysis, I thought that he graded pretty favorably all around, right? He really surprised me in that regard. I felt like his pass protection, 22 out of 25. One thing that he did a great job of was just staying inside out on a lot of these edge rushers, right? By that, I mean, say Alex Leatherwood, right? In his video, I was mentioning how with a speedy edge rusher, a lot of times he'd find himself just kick sliding as quickly as possible and bailing out to try and cut that guy off from his track to the quarterback. Well, what he would do in that is he'd have to open up his hips and turn and then give up an inside lane for a simple B gap counter, right? Mayfield, he does a great job at trusting those sort of technical aspects of his game, trusting the kick slides and various pass sets, and he never really opens the door unnecessarily, which I really liked in that regard. I also thought in terms of his hands, then when it came to sort of striking on that near point and utilizing his length to its fullest extent, I feel like he did a significantly better job in 2020 than he did in 2019. And that's sort of a common denominator that I could bring up on every one of these categories, right? I felt like his 2019 film, particularly like, say, that Penn State game, right? If you were grading just positives and negatives based off a play to play basis, how he was doing, I would say that he probably had more negatives in the first half of that Penn State game than he had in the Minnesota and Michigan State games combined, right? I felt like he didn't necessarily change any one thing massively, but there were a bunch of small changes that I feel like just accumulated in him becoming a significantly better player. And I feel like that's evident in almost every area here, as we'll kind of touch on as I keep going. But I felt like his striking was good in that regard when it came to getting hands on, utilizing, even though people were worried about the length, utilizing his arms to all 32 and 5/8 inches, right? In terms of his run blocking, as well as I'll lump physicality and finishing in there as well. 13 out of 15 and 9.5 out of 10 are very high marks, respectively, compared to the other guys that I've graded to this point. And I think that he is more than deserving of them, to say the least. If I'd use one word to describe him as just a run blocker, he is an absolute bully. He is a menace. He is a guy that you just don't want to run into, and you don't want to cross, right? Because he does some bad things to guys out there between those lines, right? I don't know what he does outside the lines, but if it's anything like what he does inside the lines, you do not want to get on Jalen Mayfield's bad side because I talked about I talked about his mobility and his ability to just find corners in space, right? I talked about his climbing ability in terms of getting to the second level and blocking linebackers, right? But even at the line of scrimmage, in terms of just down blocking three techs, reaching five techs, whatever it is, if you're going up against Jalen Mayfield, you're gonna feel him tomorrow, right? You're gonna want an ice bath tomorrow. There's gonna be bruises. There's gonna be marks. There might be some cuts, right? This guy does not quit until the referee blows the whistle or pulls him off, right? And it's fun to watch. It's really fun to watch. I think that he is most certainly a guy who, even if he's not necessarily the strongest, I think he makes up for that simply in the fact that he's going harder than you are on very many reps, right? I will say, after having kind of mentioned that sort of slight strength deficit, I guess, I don't necessarily think that moving him to guard is an automatic win, like a lot of people seem to think. I know people saw the pro day numbers, they might have been high on him at tackle. They see, oh, short arms, bad 40, blah, blah, blah. We got to play him at guard. I would think a little bit longer and harder about that before I just automatically did it or drafted him as a guard, say, as an NFL team, because I really think that the further inside you get, the less dependent the game is on the things that Mayfield drives at, right? And I don't know if that makes much sense, but when you are 320 pounds and you're going up against a 280-pound defensive end, if if your strength, raw strength, is even comparable, and you're going as hard as Mayfield does, you're more often going to win than when we put you inside against a 340-pound defensive tackle who can just manhandle you, right? Your motor and just sort of that physicality and finishing aspect, to me, could be a little bit lost on the inside when I'd rather keep him outside, where I think that even though the numbers don't reflect it, he did have the foot speed and was able to stop those speed rushes, those counters back inside. I thought he did a great job there. So I would really think long and hard before I moved him, in all honesty. And then from there, in terms of IQ and awareness, 7.5 seemed like a pretty fair grade. I didn't think that he was some savant out there in terms of anticipating twist and whatnot, but I did think he did a better job reading sort of pass rush moves and things of that nature. And I thought he looked even better in space, sort of anticipating what angle a linebacker or cornerback was going to take when he was pulling, because as I've said now, Michigan used him on the edge a lot in that regard. Wrap him around a tight end and put him one-on-one in space against a corner. Well, a lot of other offensive linemen, tackles in particular, in this class are getting juked out, and they're lying on the ground while the corner's in on the play. Mayfield, I thought, did a much better job anticipating those angles in 2020 than he did in 2019. And overall, that comes out to a 79.5 raw grade. So with that being said, you take the raw grade, multiply it by the position premium, because obviously it's not quite as high as, say, a left tackle would be, but right tackle is still pretty freaking important. So left tackle, I gave them 4.75% of their own grade reimbursed into itself. I gave right tackles 4%, right? Because I still do think it's significantly important when it comes to preventing those speed rushers and keeping your quarterback clean, but I don't think it's quite as important as protecting his blind side. But in terms of overall, that netted him as my number 4 offensive tackle to this point, which didn't surprise me quite as much as the first round grade. I think that having 4 first round tackles and 4 guys who I legitimately think could be future Pro Bowlers at their respective positions That's very rare, right? And obviously some of it will be circumstantial in terms of where they end up going, as well as the position that they end up playing. Because if somebody moves Slater into guard, if somebody moves Mayfield into guard, or what side of the line Darisaw is playing on, right? I think that there's sort of those variables that could alter their career trajectories, but I really do think that each of these four guys could have long lasting and should have long lasting futures in the league. I wouldn't be shocked at any point if Mayfield, assuming you keep him at right tackle, I really wouldn't be shocked if he has stretches or, even just a year here and there where he looks like the best of these four. I really wouldn't be shocked at all, because I was very impressed by what he did in 2020. And a lot of the reasons that his grades weren't quite as high as, say, Sewell or Slater was just the fact that I had that questionable 2019 film in the back of my head, right? And I feel like that's sort of what I'm accounting for in that 82.94. I think just based solely off 2020, if he was a guy who, he just started for the first season in 2020, I think that he would certainly be maybe the third highest guy on the board to this point, right? I think that he would be quite a bit up there. And I know a lot of people are getting caught up on the 2019 film more so than I am. That's why I believe PFF had him number 70, because they're citing that it was such a small sample size. And I fully understand that. But I think that more often than not, I'll say, when you put two really good athletic guys against each other every day, day in, day out at practice, as Michigan would have with Kwity Paye, who obviously is my number 2 edge rusher in this class, and Jalen Mayfield, I think that you get put into a situation where if there's a skill gap there, one guy is forced to rise to the occasion, or he's going to probably lose that position, right? Because just to kind of personalize this a little bit, real quick, I saw this firsthand. One of my roommates, one of my best friends, teammates, whatever you want to call him, going into our redshirt sophomore year, he was going to take over as our starting right tackle, right? And he's a physical freak, no question. He was a guy who, the minute he stepped on campus, he could do 225, 20 plus times. He could max out almost 400 pounds on bench, as well as a ridiculous squat and power clean, all those various numbers. And then, coming into that spring before our redshirt sophomore year, he had to go up against our starting defensive end, who, starting the end at the time, he was in our recruiting class, but he was just a couple steps ahead. We'll just say that. He ultimately had to go up against that guy 30, 40, 50 reps in a single practice, right, for an entire month and a half. And the first couple, man, it was not the prettiest thing that you've ever seen, right? To the point that you almost have to reevaluate yourself in terms of what are you doing and how can you give some resistance to this guy, right? And I think that pretty quickly on in that process, it's sort of a trial by fire in some ways, but you're going to have to, figure out, are you going to just let this guy embarrass you? Are you going to let this guy ruin practice, essentially, right? Are you going to let this guy just break up running plays before they can even get to the line of scrimmage? Are you going to let him get to the quarterback before receivers can even get going on their routes, right? Or are you going to figure it out? My coach said, are you going to draw a line in the sand, and are you going to rise to the occasion and figure out a way to block this guy, right? And my teammate over those next couple weeks there of spring ball, he was pretty clearly the most improved player on our entire team, right? And I think that in large part it was because, any of those technical concerns, whether it was his hand placement, his feet, having a slight forward lean out of his stance, right? Like all those things, they had to go away if you wanted to stop that guy. And, my teammate, he ended up going on to be starter the next 2 seasons, playing at a all conference level, essentially. Because what you soon realize is that nobody that you're really facing in the games on Saturdays was as good as that guy that you had to go up against on a day in, day out basis, right? I think that that's something Mayfield went through with Kwity Paye. I would very much so wager that Jalen Mayfield, he had a very similar crisis, right? You're facing a physical freak, a guy that is just flat dominant, right? What are you going to do? Are you going to get beat? Are you going to continue to do these various technical things poorly, or are you going to figure it out and get it together and really stand up for yourself in a way and beat this guy, right? And I think that Jalen, obviously, we don't have those spring ball tapes, but I would I would pretty certainly wager that that's what happened, right? And I think that you see such a drastic improvement in those those similar things that I'm talking about with my teammate. You see the improved hand placement, right? So oftentimes in 2019 he was missing with his left hand, overshooting it off that shoulder, right? Just missing in general. Guys get into his chest, like I said. That was virtually non-existent in 2020. We're talking about run blocking, right? So often he would come sort of top down and try and block guys up here while they're getting under and having better leverage. That was gone coming into 2020, right? All these things that I know Kwity Paye would not let you do to him, Mayfield corrected, right? And almost assuredly, Kwity Paye was better than all those guys that Mayfield faced this season. So now going to the next level, of course, the question is going to be, can he rise to the occasion again? Can he, now that, you're not going to be facing Kwity Paye, you're going to be facing TJ Watts, right? You're going to be facing Von Millers, Chandler Jones, guys like that, elite edge rushers. And what are you going to do? And I'll take my chances on a guy who's already proven to me that he's able to sort of step up and drastically improve his game. Even if it wasn't completely overhauling, certain aspects, there were just significant enough improvements in plenty of areas that I think accumulated in Mayfield certainly being worthy of this first round grade. I think that he's a very interesting prospect in that regard, because I highly doubt that that was just a flash in the pan. I think that he had to go up against Kwity Paye all spring last year, and I think that he was probably disappointed with the results. And what was he going to do? He was either going to keep accepting that or he was going to fix it. And I really think that most likely had to look himself in the mirror and fix those things, and that's why he's been so highly regarded after his 2020 play, right? So with that being said, we don't have much else to talk about here with Mayfield. I think he's an interesting guy. Like I said, I'll be curious where he goes. I think that if you get him into that second round, I think you can really get a good value on a guy that I saw a lot of fight out of him. I saw a lot of like I said, just that physicality, that relentless motor. I saw a lot of really good things, as well as I saw some good foot quickness, hand placement. All those things look significantly improved, despite what the pro day numbers might suggest. So with that being said, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Obviously, if you did, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe for more. And yeah, I think I'm mic'd up. Now I'm mic'd out. Peace, guys. And I should say, just to kind of wrap up that story, I guess I really didn't finish it, but no. The D end who was given our entire offensive line the work at the time, that spring ball and really his entire career at Hillsdale, was Zach Van Valkenburg, who Big Ten fans in particular might know as Iowa's defensive end right now, right? He was a grad transfer, came in our recruiting class, played 3 years, went to Iowa. Now was going to be a 2-year starter there. And very easily, if he puts together a good 2021, could be in Kwity Paye's shoes next year as somebody that we're looking at seeing in the NFL draft, right? So don't think that I was just talking about some random guy in that regard. You had a fantastic D2 athlete on the offensive line who had to rise to the occasion of a D1 caliber player. I think that's sort of what we saw with Mayfield. You had a great D1 athlete who played pretty well, showed good flashes previously. He had to rise to the occasion of the NFL caliber Kwity Paye, and I think that made both of them better players. I think that iron certainly did sharpen iron in that regard. And now I guess I'm mic'd up and now I'm micing out. See you guys.